Hello everyone, my name is Inspirasper, and today I am continuing my music production tutorial series. Now it doesn't matter if you've seen any of my previous videos regarding music production, this could be a standalone video, but today we will be covering the topic of equalization, otherwise known as EQing, and how it can be so powerful, so impactful when making songs. Now obviously, as you may have seen by the title and generally by where I'm going from this video is aimed towards those of you who are newer to music production and aren't quite as familiar with the software and the process of making a song. So that being said, let's jump right into it and learn what equalization is and why you should always use it in your songs. So to start, I think it makes sense to explain what exactly equalization is. To help me explain what equalization is and what it does, I will show you exactly how to use it in Ableton. So I've gone ahead and opened up an Ableton session, and as you can see on my screen right about here, I've already threw together some things in Ableton. I'll explain what everything is in a second, but for now, I'm gonna go to the left side under Audio Effects in Ableton and go to EQ8. So to help me explain what EQing is, I'm gonna go ahead and drag and drop this EQ8 onto a song. The song I've chosen is Grant Starship. It was released under Monstercat. Now before we continue any further, those of you who have the limited editions of Ableton may not have EQ8. You may only have EQ3, which looks like this. For now, I'm just gonna deactivate it. I don't need it for the moment. So to explain what equalization is, I have this song. And as I just explained a few seconds ago, I dragged an EQ onto it. So if I were to play my song, if I were to play this song right now, it'll sound like this. Great song, by the way, love it. So if you're unfamiliar with equalization, you may be wondering what exactly it did. I mean, the EQ8 is on this track with the song is playing, and if you know the song, you know that's exactly how it sounds, so it seems like nothing is happening right now, and that's because nothing is. Equalization is the process of altering the frequencies of a given track in your song. So you can use equalization to either raise or lower certain frequencies of a particular layer, which, as I mentioned earlier, can help all your layers fit together like a puzzle piece in one big puzzle. And while it's nice to explain it in metaphors and all that stuff, I think it makes more sense to actually demonstrate the process itself. So I'm finally going to use the EQ8 that I dragged onto the song. So looking down here at my EQ8, this is the initial state of this audio effect. This is what it looks like by default. I haven't touched it. The first thing you'll notice is there's this window, this black window, right? And it seems to be laid out in a grid format. This represents your frequencies over decibels, or volume. On your y-axis over here, you have your decibels, which goes all the way up to 12, positive 12, or down to negative 12. And this orange bar represents 0, which is the default volume. And on the y-axis, you have your frequencies. All the way at the very far left is 0 hertz, and it goes all the way up to about 20,000 hertz or so. And this is a logarithmic scale, so clearly the gap from 100 to 1,000, it looks the same as from 1,000 to 10,000. But as you can see, as we get closer to 1,000, these vertical bars get closer and closer. And it's just to represent that the frequency isn't scaled 1 to 1. That's not how it works. It's on a logarithmic scale. If you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. There's a way to tell what frequency you're on anyways, and that doesn't matter, so let's just move on. The next thing you'll notice is these circles along this orange bar. By default, the first 4 will be on, but you can go down here and click these orange boxes to turn on up to 8 of these circles. These circles can be thought of as little handles, little nodes you can drag and move to alter your frequencies. You can move these little nodes or dots around by clicking on them and simply moving. Click and hold. And you'll notice that this orange bar starts to shift based on where I've moved my dots. And you can move multiple dots into whatever patterns you want. Now, I've gone ahead and I've altered the frequency of this layer. If I were to play this song right now, I should already notice a difference. So let's go ahead and do that. And that's with the EQ, with the random pattern that I made. And believe me, this was very random, no pattern to it whatsoever. So you can tell exactly what the EQ does. I'm gonna play it again, but then I'm gonna turn this EQ on and off, essentially activating and deactivating the changes we made, just so you can get a feel of what exactly it's doing. So first I'm gonna play it without the EQ, and then throughout the way I'll turn it on and off. And as you could tell, the song sounded very different between the on and off state of the equalization. And that's because by moving these dots and therefore this orange bar around, I've altered certain frequencies of this song. Now, for the sake of explaining this further, I'm going to delete this EQ and add another one back in, basically just so I'm at the default state again. Now, the default state of most of these little nodes or dots is just to move the orange bar. Now, you can change the properties of these dots by going down to this drop-down menu and selecting any of these. These alter the way that orange bar moves wherever that dot is. For example, if I were to choose this setting that looks kind of like a valley, then you'll notice that this orange bar dips and there's just a hole wherever this frequency is. Now you can see at the top left, this is the frequency of the current dot or node that I'm on. And I can change nodes by clicking down here on their number, which means that this 2 right here, it means I've just created a hole at 245 hertz, which means no sound will come from the 245 hertz part of this song, if that makes any sense. And I can alter how heavy or significant this hole is by altering this Q. A really high Q value means that I've essentially pinpointed one frequency, more or less. A really low Q value means there's a very large range both below and above this frequency range that are being impacted. Now I can do a similar thing where instead of creating a valley, I could create a peak. And I did that by selecting this particular option. Since I've raised this orange bar, whatever frequency I set this to will be amplified. That particular frequency range, that sound, will become louder. Another setting you can do is to change the left and right cutoff. To do that, you can select these. You can select the options that look like the bars diving. These top 2 are on the left side, and these bottom 2 are on the right side. And by that, I mean, and that essentially determines your high or low end cutoff frequencies. This option creates a normal drop off, and the ×4 makes a very steep drop off, which is more or less saying whatever frequency I'm at, nothing below it will ever come out. Similarly, if I were to do that at the very far right end, I can select this one with a very minor cutoff, or I could select the bottom one for a very steep cutoff, which essentially determines the high end cutoff frequency, which means nothing higher than that frequency will come out of that particular layer. So now you know a little bit about the basics of how to EQ. And mind you, this is just with the default Ableton stock EQ8 plugin. This is just the default EQ effect that comes with Ableton. And there are many EQ plugins out there that you can use which have their own unique features and what have you. But for now, this gets the point across. So I've explained a little bit what EQ is, and I've gone into a little bit how to use the EQ8 plugin, but I haven't necessarily demonstrated how to use it when making a song yet. So what I've gone ahead and done is I've gone ahead and created 3 example songs, if you will. They're not really songs, they're just little snippets of a song. So I'm gonna delete this real quick. So I just went ahead and made this tiny loop. All it contains is a bass line, some chords, an ARP, some leads, and some basic drums. Now, mind you, there are no audio effects on this whatsoever. None. So this top group I've called no EQ because, as you can see through if I go through these layers, if you look at the bottom, there is no equalization on these tracks whatsoever. So essentially, I've just mashed a bunch of layers together, and they sound like this. Now I know that's nothing too fancy, but it gets the point across for this tutorial's sake. As I said, there are no audio effects on those tracks whatsoever. So essentially, I just mashed a bunch of layers together on top of each other, and quite frankly, that doesn't sound too good when they're not equalized. So then what I did in this middle grouping, these are the exact same layers, but this time I EQ'd them. If I were to go through these layers now, you'll notice at the bottom, there are different forms of EQing. And so what I did was for each layer, I essentially chose what frequencies I wanted to be prominent and what frequencies I wanted to be cut out of that particular layer. So for some example, on this chord layer, as you can see from my EQ, I essentially got rid of a lot of the low ends, so anything below roughly 264 hertz, I removed that. And then same thing for the high end, anything above about 5500 hertz, I removed. And then also I took a little bit out of this particular range because another layer was using that particular frequency range more prominently, and I wanted that other layer to stick out of the crowd, if you will. Now without EQing, this particular layer sounds like this. and then with EQing. So the difference itself is a little subtle, and it might not seem like a huge drastic change, but when mixed together with all the other layers, it makes a huge difference. So I'll play the entire grouping where all of these layers are now EQ'd, so they work hand in hand, they work well together. And then I'll go back to the one without EQing. Now I'll switch back and forth just so you hear the difference a little better. And I don't know if you can tell, but I can tell a huge difference. The EQ'd group sounds a lot cleaner and crisper. And now, granted, again, keep in mind there are no other audio effects whatsoever. So what I did was I made a third grouping where I kept to the EQ, but then I added in a bunch of audio effects as well that I thought needed. And it sounds like this. Now again, that's not a huge difference. And that's not the focus of this video. The focus is the difference between not using equalization and using equalization. But I just thought I'd throw that in the mix anyways, because why not? Now, if you're still not entirely convinced by what we just listened to, the difference between not using EQ and using EQ, well, if you're not convinced, then I'm pretty sure it's because what I was using was an unmastered version of both of those groups, which don't exactly do it justice. So what I did was I exported each of those groups individually, and I mastered them. So all I did was export their audio files and put them into a separate master Ableton session. As you can see by each of these tracks, none of them have any audio effects. They're all routed through the same universal master track. So they're all being mastered the same way. So I'm gonna go ahead and play you the non-EQ'd version of the song, the EQ'd version, and then the EQ'd version plus audio effects, just so you can tell the difference between them all. And I think there, once it's mastered, you can tell a huge difference. Let's play again. The difference between the track without EQ and with EQ is humongous. To me, the track with no EQ just sounds so muddy and compressed and distorted. But that's the power of EQing. You make a song, you EQ every layer, even if it's just a little bit. Maybe you get rid of a small frequency range, and it will sound so much better. Because if you think about it, there's no need for your leads, some kind of lead synth. There's no need for that to have low frequencies, below however many, I don't know, 500, because that's where your bass frequencies are. So then your bass frequencies start to get all muddied and they add up and start to stack, and it just sounds distorted if you don't EQ, because you have a bunch of unwanted frequencies poking out from other layers. So if you EQ each of your layers and mix it all together, you'll get a cleaner sound, which I highly recommend. And that's pretty much all I have for you. I hope this was worth your time. Again, as I always do, I ramble, but I hope I got my point across. I'd really hate to waste your time, so I hope you thought it was useful. If you thought it was useful, then my mission is accomplished, and that's pretty much it. If you're new to my channel, I hope you stick around. I make videos like this all the time. If you're a fan and you've been here for a while, thank you very much. I really appreciate you. With that being said, thank you for watching. I hope to see you all in the next video. Peace.